Hey y'all, I'm glad you found this channel. Here today I'm going to talk about my heroic dose experience on mushrooms for the first time on camera. This is a story that I tell my friends all the time, or anytime I meet someone that I know is trippy. I'll always bring this story up if I have the time. In it, I spoke to some kind of mushroom alien intelligence. I learned to connect with my ancestors, and I saw the Philosopher's Stone in my mind's eye. Just to name a few. Just your typical Tuesday night, you know? So we're gonna get into that. This is one of my favorite trip stories, and this might be useful for you if you're curious about other people's experience, what it's like. You know, I'm sure some of you have already done it before and you want to just hear someone else's report, or you may be looking to do it yourself and you're just curious on what it could be. I think it's important to go into it with no expectations, but you know, more than likely, whatever you hear about it is going to influence how it turns out. So try to keep as much of a blank slate as possible. With all of that said, as I'll reveal in my story, even the things that you don't think will be that important, like you may hear something someone talked about in their experience, but you didn't think much of it, and then all of a sudden that's like one of the main motifs in your experience. So we'll get a little bit more into that. So here we go. So chances are, if you've heard of the heroic dose, you've probably heard of Terence McKenna, who famously coined the term, and he really laid the groundwork for what would become the ultimate initiation of a psychonaut, which is sitting in silent darkness, taking 5 dried grams of psilocybin mushrooms, and just letting it happen. So the idea is sitting in the darkness, it's like sensory deprivation. So the less external stimuli that you have going on, the more your imagination kind of just fills the gaps. So a lot of really wild things happen when you have your eyes closed, or you're not being stimulated by some kind of outside circumstance or anything like that. Terence McKenna said a lot of things that are really interesting about the mushroom or the mushroom experience. So I'm gonna link a video or maybe a playlist of some of my favorite Terence videos where he talks about the mushroom. Maybe you already have heard him speak about it, but if not, it's definitely very interesting to hear what he has to say. But one of the things that piqued my curiosity the most was he kept talking about a voice, and he kept treating the mushroom itself as some kind of alien intelligence. And I know he never really settled on one theory of what that could be, but I know he considered the possibility that it was some kind of spirit of the mushroom, or even possibly an alien intelligence that is hiding itself in the mushroom. Or maybe hiding's not the best word, but this is their medium of choice to communicate with humans, which is just a rich like sci-fi idea. I feel like you could write so many science fiction books just based off of that alone. So that really got my curiosity piqued. So of course I wanted to try it. And yeah, I'll let Terence McKenna do most of that speaking for himself. I'll link the videos so you can just hear that, because I won't do it any justice. All right, yeah, let's get into the story. This happened back in 2013. So at the time I was 19 years old, and I was living in my own apartment, and I decided to go for it. One thing that I will add is that I ended up only taking 4.5 grams, which I know is not like the proposed actual amount you're supposed to do, 5 grams, but I mean, once you start getting close to 5, it's gonna be a pretty powerful experience. I kind of want to just get into some of the reasons why I wanted to do this. You know, the first thing that really got me into psychedelics in general, not just mushrooms, was that I heard you could see patterns and beautiful images and hallucinations and stuff like that that was really what drew me to wanting to try psychedelics. After I had started experimenting with cannabis, I just heard that if you took enough, that could get psychedelic, and mushrooms and acid and stuff, you see really beautiful things. And so that was really the main thing that drew me to wanting to have these kinds of experiences. So with the mushroom in particular, this was of course after I had discovered Terence McKenna on YouTube and heard his talks and his videos. The thing that was bothering me at the time was I felt like I had no connection to my ancestors. One of the things that indigenous cultures, like American indigenous or South American, Central American, they have this connection with their ancestors. And especially the cultures that have psychedelic rituals and take psychedelics, like the ayahuasca tribes in the Amazon, they have this strong connection to their ancestors. And I feel like in America, we're just cut off from that. We don't have anything like that. Like, for me, I know that, my grandma's from Mexico. I had some great 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 grandparents that came here from France and Germany and England and stuff like that, but that's not really like the same type of connection. That's a super vague idea, and we don't have any culture that like came from them. It just seems like being in America, it just seems like we're cut off from all of that, and we don't really have any kind of genuine connection to our ancestors. So that was my main wish going into this experience, is I wanted to find out how I could connect to my ancestors. The other thing that I really wanted to do was I was super curious about what Terence was saying about how the mushroom speaks. That sounds kind of crazy to anybody from the outside, but you never know with these things. So I decided to give it a shot and see what happens out of curiosity. Like when you hear these stories be told by Terence and others, it's just like super interesting. And you're like, it's like scary, but it's super interesting at the same time. So that's why I decided to go for it. So yeah, let's get started with the story. In the beginning, I weighed out my dose. It was about 4.5 grams or 4.55. Took the mushrooms. If you've ever tasted mushrooms, it just tastes kind of weird, dirty. It's not the best flavor in the world. It just depends on how strong your stomach is, how sensitive you are to weird tastes like that. So I ate the mushrooms. I was sitting in this old green recliner that I got from my grandma and just waiting for it to come on. I was thinking about just what was going to happen, but I was trying not to like overthink it. But obviously you're going to be excited and nervous and scared. So I was feeling all of those things. Once I started to feel the trip coming on, I threw on my headphones and started playing some music. I was just really moved by this particular song at the time, which is called Me Yesterday / Chorded by Flying Lotus. And I'll throw a link for that song in there, but it's just a very mystical song, very cosmic vibe. So I thought it would be a good one to listen to. And that ended up just literally launching me into space. What I remember when the trip started coming on is I started to close my eyes, and it was kind of just like one of those classic like Star Wars scenes, when they hit warp drive and you see like the stars kind of going past. Like that was the first thing that happened, and I've heard other people talk about this kind of thing too. So I guess this is just like how those internal hallucinations start, is just like little globs of light, just kind of going. The song came on, Me Yesterday Chorded. This is where things started to get really weird. The first thing that happened was I saw myself, and it's hard to describe this because it's like you're not in your body, you're in your head, and you're like this disembodied consciousness in your hallucination, but stuff is still happening to you. I became this neon green wave. It was like a giant sine wave, like just a giant neon green string of some kind, almost like a musical string. And it stretched light years. I feel like I was like, this beam was galactic in scale. It was huge. The bass of the music was vibrating it. So it was like this big cosmic string that was vibrating at like 52 octaves below C, like the lowest note in the universe. That was just the beginning. And I was like riding this wave into deep space while this awesome song was going on. And then when I got to the destination, I was looking through the lens of a space telescope. This telescope was a series of hexagons. It was like neon green hexagons kind of stacked like this, like one right here, two right here, and then three right here, which later I would find out that is the exact same shape as the new James Webb Space Telescope that's going up. And at this time, I was living less than like a mile from NASA, where they were actually testing that telescope in real life. But I don't remember knowing or even seeing what it looked like until after the experience. And a lot of stuff like that happens to me with my trips. Like I get some kind of verification after the fact, or I don't know anything and then something is revealed to me like that. So anyway, I'm looking through this giant space telescope, just scanning the stars, and then I'm seeing inside of my little crosshairs all these stars in a grid. It's like a three-dimensional grid. So just like imagine little points of light, like in little cube-shaped grid. And if you've ever heard of Indra's net or Indra's jewels, that's kind of like what I saw. It was just like an infinite repeating grid that was all connected somehow. In this grid, these were actually stars that I was looking at. And when I was looking at them, they were blinking different colors like green, red, blue. And in my intuition, I understood that these colors were indicating biosignatures. So basically, this was telling me that there is life here in these star systems or in these planets. And as I was scanning, I saw them everywhere. Basically, what was revealed to me was that alien life is everywhere. And maybe we're going to discover it very soon. Maybe even with this James Webb telescope. If it happens, I'm calling it right now. It was just this incredible like revelation. I don't know if this is true or if it's literally true, but I'm under the persuasion that life is everywhere and it is extremely abundant across the universe. It's just that the scale is so vast that we can't really contact any of these people or aliens or whatever. That was one of the main things that happened in the beginning. Whenever that was going on, the next thing that I saw was like a little cartoon Merlin. Like if you've ever seen like a Disney movie with Merlin, is like a little wizard looking guy in a hat, little cartoonish looking thing. And I saw him toiling away at creating the Philosopher's Stone, which is the main theme of alchemy. So what I was really looking at was an alchemist creating what's called the Great Work, which is the alchemist's stone or the lapis or the philosopher's stone. I got the impression that this is what modern artists are doing too. We are just continuing what the alchemists were actually shooting for. And what the alchemists were working on in their day is almost like a cartoon version of, or not cartoon, but like a childlike attempt at something that we are like a real enterprise that we're trying to do, which is create the alchemist stone, which I don't know how much I can get into that right now, but just the basic idea of that, if you haven't heard it, is that the alchemist stone is the human soul created into an object that is in real life. That's a huge simplification, but that's basically what it is. And art is kind of like that. So I think that's cool that they call it the Great Work, because it is like kind of the ultimate art piece. If you can put a human soul in real life in some kind of object that's containing it. And so I saw this alchemist stone and it looked like some kind of logo. It was like almost like a Texas shape, but like rounded edges in 3D. And then I saw like fractal colors on one side, just a bunch of fractals and colors, like reds and blues. And then in the heart of it, I saw all of the elements. I saw smoke, water, fire, electricity, and it was all just churning in here. On top of that, I saw human elements like sweat, blood, tears, snot, you know, and it was just like all of it was contained in here, and it just had this like it almost had like an emblem vibe to it. It seemed like it was emblematic too. It wasn't just like a stone, it was like a logo for your soul, or almost like a signature. It's hard to explain, but I've actually seen this again recently, and it was even more like advanced and high definition, and like this was years later. So this was the very first time that I saw the stone, though. It felt like the alchemists were basically doing what we want to do as artists, and that is to get the human soul out there for other people to see. So far, this is all happening. This is wild. And I definitely feel like some kind of intelligence is showing me these things. Like it looked like I was taking a tour through a museum, and like I was just on a ride, you know, like I was not dictating any of this. This was just what was happening to me passively. Since I felt like I was in the presence of some kind of alien intelligence, I decided now would be a good time to try to ask a question, which I said earlier, my main goal going into this was to learn to connect to my ancestors. So that's what I did. I sat down and I posed the question to the mushroom, and I said, how do I know my ancestors? It was just one instant later, like less than a second, like a Google response, and it just said, their art. And I was like, wow. You know, it took me a while to really understand what that could mean, but my takeaway is that art is the best way we can step into the experience of our ancestors. It's the best way that we can actually feel what they felt and know what they knew, and that's just basically the best way to get someone's life force accessible to generations in the future. I thought that was really cool, and it kind of broadened my idea of who my ancestors are. Instead of thinking just like, you know, my ancestors from France or my ancestors from Mexico, it broadened to just include any human beings. I'm sure that your actual DNA bloodline is important, but it broadened my idea to just include any humans that have contributed to the art or contributed to the historical narrative in any way, that those are your ancestors, because we really are standing on the shoulders of those people. So those were some of the main things that happened. The trip kind of winded down from there. This was like the entire peak that I just laid out. As the peak kind of dwindled and the hallucinations kind of like chilled out a little bit, I was just listening to music. I was listening to a bunch of different stuff. Some St. Vincent. I was listening to one of her songs called the Apocalypse Song. And it's actually one of her more cosmic songs, you know, talking about carbon in her body. And it just fit into this cosmic theme of the trip I was having. That was from her album Marry Me. And there's a picture of her as the cover art. And I just remember looking at that picture, and she just had this like glowing aura. And it was very like heavenly and calming. And so I always associate St. Vincent with that whenever I think about her now. And she's from Texas too, represent. Well, there was one more crazy thing that happened. So when I was listening to some music, I was listening to an artist called George Duke, who's a keyboard player, and he played really funky like jazz fusion, but like really psychedelic stuff too. So I was listening to this George Duke record. I don't even know which album it was. I still can't find it to this day. But basically, while I was listening to it, in the recording, they simulate the sound of a fucking UFO landing. So it's like this whole thing like, and this like orgy happens, and it was just like the craziest thing that could have happened, because one of the things that Terence McKenna talks about is that the mushroom experience has this kind of alien cosmic vibe. So I was getting that, and let me actually read the quote of what Terence McKenna said, because I thought it was good. Terence said, "It presents itself as this particular slice of alien aesthetic motif from Hollywood. The shiny metallic surfaces, the mercuroid forms, the piercing instantaneous biointelligence." It's so hard to put this stuff into words, but Terence does it so brilliantly. This isn't the only form or aesthetic that a mushroom trip can take, but for whatever reason, this is one of the more common ones, and it definitely happened to me. Just hearing that George Duke song where the UFO Landed was just so on point. And I didn't know that music before. It was just the most mind-blowing moment for me. As the trip wound down even more from there, it actually got kind of uncomfortable and difficult. I was tripping alone, right? So I was very nervous and scared at one point. I felt like I couldn't call my friends. I was thinking about it, and I felt like I couldn't call them because I hadn't nurtured our friendship enough. Because at this point in my life, this was about 1 or 2 years into my psychedelic journeying, when I was like tripping more often and like kind of discovering all of this stuff. I was paying a lot of attention to that and kind of neglecting my friendships because, you know, they weren't exactly on that same level. So I just wasn't tending and watering those relationships as much as I needed to. Obviously, it has benefits of exploring these psychedelic spaces and taking these psychonautic journeys, but you have to still maintain your friendships and water those plants, which I learned that after this experience. So that ended up being a positive thing, you know. It made me realize that I could be a better friend, but it was just a really scary moment at that time because I just felt like I couldn't call anyone to like come trip sit me. So it got kind of scary at the end, but overall, this was just the wildest, weirdest experience I've ever had on psychedelics. And I've had some pretty profound mystical experiences on other psychedelics and other times, which once I make those videos, I'm going to link them. Those will be there. This was definitely the weirdest, and it was just on brand for everything that Terence McKenna was talking about. I really wasn't expecting alchemy to emerge as the main theme. That ended up putting me on another journey of learning about alchemy, and alchemical motifs have been a consistent thing for me ever since then. I didn't think it was significant in any way before that. But now it's just a regular occurrence for me, and it's like part of this profound journey that I'm on. So that was the beginning of that. Overall, just a really wild time. If I would recommend anything to you, I would say if you're gonna do it, make sure that if you are gonna be alone, have someone ready that you're gonna call. Just in case things start to get scary or you need to talk to someone, have somebody that knows you're gonna be tripping that you can call, or even someone in the other room that has some kind of experience in this stuff. They'll know how to help calm you down, or at least like make sure that you're safe for that time. That's the gist of my story. I just want to add that this is a new channel, and if you liked hearing about this experience, please subscribe and, you know, like the video, comment. All of that stuff really helps get a new channel off the ground. Just want to add as well, if you're interested in hearing any mind-expanding conversations from some of the best psychedelic musicians today, I do artist interviews, and I'm going to put that on a playlist link here. I don't know how many links they're going to let me put in this video, but if not, I'll put them all in the description. If you want to hear more about experiences like this, I'm going to do more videos like this. And I'll probably even retell the same stories as I get better and upgrade equipment and get more used to talking on camera. It's still a little weird for me, but I'm trying to talk as if you're someone that I know, because I like it when YouTube videos are like that, but it definitely takes a little practice and adjustment. I have an endless amount of stories like this, so please subscribe if you want to hear some more trippy encounters and mystical experiences, and I'll be putting more videos up. If you made it all the way to the end, I appreciate you hearing my story, and if you're gonna go do a heroic dose, please just be safe. Remember, set and setting are the ultimate keys. Yeah, you should be surprised by what you find. I can guarantee you that. It's not gonna be boring. Something's gonna go down. So, alrighty. Thanks. Bye.